Hey everyone, this is Dr. Sam Shay of theworkonlinecourse.com, and I'm here today with Bryan Clark. Now, Bryan has a website called www.friendly-universe.com. Now, that's an actual dash, not DASH. So it's friendly-universe.com. And Bryan, tell us about how you're involved with the work. What is your right now?
Sure, thanks, Sam. I'm actually currently involved with the work where I mostly focus on helping entrepreneurs or solopreneurs who want to create a friendlier universe through their programs, their talents and gifts, whether it's mind, body, or spirit, or any combination of those. And through online courses, trainings, or even one-on-one coachings that they do. And historically, I've also worked privately with individuals and couples who've struggled with everything from relationship stress to conflicts in their marriage and divorces, physical pain in the body. So I've done a whole array of different kinds of things with the work in my business as well.
And so you're what's called helpline certified, and I mean you've how many years you've been involved in work? Can you tell us where you're at with the work, etc. as an organization?
Sure. Yeah, I discovered the work in 2008, and I had come from learning about Eckhart Tolle and kind of didn't really know how to apply all the stuff I was learning that Eckhart was teaching. It was very powerful. I noticed in the Power of Now and A New Earth, I just got all these juicy nuggets of information, but I didn't really know what to do with it. So I didn't know how to make a practice or even become more present like Eckhart always spoke of. So I actually stumbled upon Byron Katie through Oprah Winfrey. So through Oprah's podcasts and such, I found about this woman named Byron Katie and got her book in 2008. And then I attended my first school for the work in Los Angeles, California at the time in March of 2009 and really just dove into the work. I ended up reading all of Katie's books and started practicing it on myself and friends. And so since 2009, I've been very active with the work. For me, it's a daily practice. I've created businesses out of it and also run a local meetup group for people that are learning the work.
Cool. And you're also helpline. You do
The
work on.
helpline, yeah, the helpline is Katie's offered through Katie's Institute for the work for people who are either just need a little support or who are trying to learn the process of the work. It's a way that people can call in, and I'm one of the people that you could maybe end up speaking to on that line. And it's just a free way that Katie offers the work to people who don't have the money for her school or don't have an interest in going or too far away. It's a worldwide thing.
Right. Okay. So then how has the work made a big difference in your life personally? As particularly compared to other things that you may have tried and done, or like even your background and training and things like that.
Sure. Well, I've always been interested in the mind since I was a little kid. I used to practice hypnosis on my cousins when I was a teenager, so I was always
Okay.
intrigued. I learned how to do this,
Okay,
and I had
any war stories you want to share?
uh,
Like get them eating
uh,
onions and stuff? I mean, what did you do as a
no, I
teenager?
mostly practiced with pain, and so I was able
Okay.
to remove pain, and that was they were willing guinea pigs. So
All right.
I did this when I was like 15. But I was always interested in the mind, and just it was fascinating to me. So I ended up majoring in psychology. I went there a roundabout way. I studied foreign languages and went to psychology and got a master's degree in applied psychology. So it's
Mm,
not counseling per se. It's called human factors. It's studying how people interact with objects and environments and really just designing things to be user friendly or good customer experiences. So that's what I focus on in my business these days. But I learned a lot about cognition, perception, motivation, and generally just how the mind deals with the world around us. And none of it that I learned in my academic setting, and I've got a large bill the size of a house for my education, none of that ever really helped me do what the work has done. The work, after reading tons of self-help books, I mean, I've read probably the gamut of them, Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer, you know, Eckhart Tolle, and some of these aren't necessarily regarded as self-help, but I've read a ton of self-help books, How to Be Happy No Matter What, don't sweat the small things, all those little things that became popular. And none of them had like a really distinct process that was simple to use and remember. And the work's been very powerful in my life because I found that the more I practice the work, and even starting out, this happened very rapidly. I think going to her school where you're totally immersed is helpful. But even if you just do a weekly or some kind of a regular practice of just questioning your thoughts, identifying and questioning your thoughts, the mind then begins to, in my experience, question almost everything, and it's effortless. It's people sometimes think it's a lot of work to do this, in spite of it being called the work. Just the way your mind begins to interface with the world around you, and the things that you hear people say, it just takes it into at least that very first question of the work: is it true? And so it's like I'm able to process the world much differently. People say things that used to really affect me, used to ruin my day, and now sometimes I hear them as, wow, I can't believe I used to believe that. I usually use the analogy when I teach the work of Santa Claus, how when I was a little boy, I used to believe in Santa Claus, and now I can walk through the mall around Christmas time and I see a man in a suit, but I can see all the believers and how they gather and want to sit on his lap and worried about being naughty or nice, but I just don't believe that anymore. So I don't get pulled into the drama of the belief system, but I'm able to witness it. And that's how things like, I've worked on a lot of social approval things.
Hmm.
At the age of 19, I actually came out as a gay man, and that was one of the bigger things I've worked on was this stress of, I ran away at the age of 19 because my family didn't exactly accept it back then. And I, had wrestled with a lot of inner demons too, being raised, in a Christian faith and everything else. My grandfather was a preacher, so I had all this stuff, so to speak, against me at the time. And the work just really helped with a lot of self-acceptance and just really parsing out what was true for me in my experience and helping me to discover who I really was by understanding what I wasn't, all the lies I'd been telling myself and trying to please all these other people in my life that really was the wrong way about getting to know who I was.
Hmm.
So the work helped me to really identify those beliefs that were, pulling me in the wrong direction. Just, you know, I went through group counseling and individual counseling, and none of it really helped. What I found is when I would go to a psychotherapist, I sometimes walked out with more stuff being pulled to the surface, more stuff to work with. And so what I found was that the work complemented that really well. I was able to take all the stressful stuff that came up during our sessions and use the work to go deeper into it and really get to the work really hits the cause and effect of our belief system. And that was more powerful to me than just dredging up an old story that was painful to me.
Yeah. How would you describe the work, including the like to someone who's never heard of it before, someone who's brand new listening to this? How would
Hmm.
you describe the work in a simple and clear way that they can like, okay, I get it.
Well, I do like how you described the IQ, the identifying and questioning
Well,
thoughts.
I
I
can't.
actually,
That's not my descriptor, but I mean, I'm borrowing that from how it's been described
okay.
before. But yeah.
Yeah, I liked that. I actually add a third step to the work myself.
Okay.
So I think the first step is being able to identify the stressful thoughts. So really, it's about developing a relationship with your thoughts to notice that they aren't who or what you are, but they're things that are occurring to you. So it's really a listening exercise where you have to really get in touch with that inner dialogue, those voices in your head. A lot of people call it. I've heard some interesting names like
The
mind
underworld.
chatters. Yeah, but it's like the mind chatter or monkey mind or I heard motor mind the other day, where it's just
Motor
running
mind.
like,
Okay, interesting.
yeah, like a motor mouse. Now you got a
Hmm.
motor mind. And so I help people to take that mind chatter and to slow down and start to witness what those thoughts are. Just like it's a way of the way we relate to our breathing or the blood circulating through our body. We don't say, "Oh, that's me." So we do this with our thoughts that we just identify so quickly. So I think that's part of the thing is to help people to really identify that what you're thinking and believing isn't necessarily equal to who you are. It's just that when you believe a thought, you have to act it out. So I often show them that what you're thinking and believing leads to your emotional reactions, the behaviors that you're having. So again, a lot like that Santa Claus example, if you believe in Santa Claus, you have to live it out. You can't believe and not believe in Santa Claus at the same time. And for those of us who have gotten over the belief of Santa Claus, you can't force yourself to believe in Santa Claus again. So I help people to identify those thoughts. And then the work is a simple way that just using 4 questions and then exploring the opposites of the original thought that you had. So like, he doesn't respect me, going through, is it true? And so identifying, just getting still. It's a meditative process of self-inquiry is how I'd say it in a very short way. But it's a way that you can identify the thoughts that are causing the stress and pain in your life, and really to identify that that is what's causing the pain in your life, not that person over there, but the thoughts I'm having about that person.
So you
And
said, so the two-step process of identifying the thoughts, and then Q is questioning the thoughts, and the work
mhm.
of Byron Katie is the system of how to question those stressful thoughts using four
Yeah,
questions, and then
and
we'll
then
get
those
to turnarounds.
turnarounds.
Yeah. And you said there
And
was a
then
third thing you like to do. What's that third thing?
the third thing to me is living it out. And so when I work with private clients, I basically encourage them to live out the turnarounds. So these opposites that you're exploring of your original belief and putting it into practical mode where you can take it out into the world and actually live it out and test it out. The work also to me is all about testing out what I believe. And so when someone says something to me, rather than just take it without questioning as an assumption or as God's truth, I like to actually consider it. And so I think the work just helps me to slow down, consider things, and then to deliberately live my life in a different way, or at least seeing what results after I question what I thought was true. So it's identifying, questioning, and then living out your discoveries is
Mm.
the third way I see.
So, uh, going with let's go into the specifics of the Q of the IQ, L, I guess. L for
Yeah, I was gonna
living.
say there's not a good like third letter for that.
IQ. Wait, how do you tack on a letter L while still making it sound, catchy? The only instant thing you could tack on to any acronym to make it sound catchy is X, like TEDx,
Yeah, right.
IQX, make it
So the X is
sound
the transformation part, living
X,
out the
yeah.
transformation.
So we'll have to work on that. What is the
Yeah,
X of whatever? Anyway,
I'll get
so
back to you.
the Q is the 4 questions and turnaround. So again, for people, uh, I'm gonna ask you to talk about the 4 questions and turnaround specifically as if you were describing it to someone who's never heard of the work before, and they've just had this pre-frame of IQL.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. So once you've identified a stressful thought, I'll just use he doesn't respect me since I brought that up. So then I take that and I think one of the most important parts of doing the work that I didn't do at first, that I learned a couple of years into it, is to really sit specifically in the situation that you're imagining that's causing the stress. So really, I like to go down to the photograph level of that. Like if you had a Polaroid camera and you took a picture,
Mhm.
where were you sitting or standing or laying down? What was the environment like? Was it day or night? I really like to get very still with that. So that's what makes this work meditative for me. And in that stillness, I ask these 4 questions. So if I'm working on the thought he doesn't respect me, I want to go down to I was sitting in my car driving on the freeway and someone cut me off in traffic. And I could see it was a male, so he doesn't respect me. Or, whatever it is I project onto that person. So the first question is it true? And where the meditation part comes in with this is if I'm just using my intellect to answer the question, then it's a yes. I'm like, my ego just kicks in. So the work is really more about tapping into your inner wisdom that's not that surface level knee jerk response kind of answer. So I like to really sit and get still and actually contemplate these 4 questions. So the first question, is it true?
Mhm.
Well, I noticed, yeah, I saw him pull in front of me and he went really fast and I had to slam on my brakes. So I'm like noticing when I ask, is it true, that all my proof starts to surface. And So it's really just kind of checking, is what I was even holding on to that was producing my stress, was that even true for me? Is it even worth, kind of, you're even looking at a level of, is it even worth holding on to? You know, is this something that's a true fact or a statement that's true? And then question two of the work is, can you absolutely know that it's true? And usually you skip over that question if you come to a no answer with question one. So both of these questions, one and two, you want to only give a yes or a no. You want to really, to me, I like to check out, even if I have a no, I like to check out the yes, just to give them both equal opportunity to be the right answer. Because this is my life I'm talking about. This is my, the filter I have on the world. I want to make sure it's right with me. So I like to sit in those two questions. Is it true? Can I really know that? Sometimes I put them into one, but can I really know that this is true? He cut me off in traffic, or he doesn't respect me in that case. And so once I get a yes or no, and it's fine to have either one. I mean, you can end up on a yes. The real thing you want to do is get in touch with what's real, what's true for you. So there's no right or wrong answer to those questions. You can proceed to question three, whether you end up with a yes or a no. And then question three invites you to take a look at the cause and effect of believing the thought. So like if you believe in Santa Claus, you know, you stand in line for an hour at the mall and you lose sleep the night before Christmas and all that stuff. And if I believe that he doesn't respect me, a lot of road rage comes out in that scenario.
So just being clear that he doesn't respect me isn't talking about Santa Claus. You've switched back to the cutting off in traffic.
Back to the, okay. Yeah.
Unless it was Santa Claus cutting you off in traffic. Though,
or if he gives me coal, he doesn't respect me.
I'm sure you could see though the reindeers switching into your lane from a mile away though. So I'm not sure. You know. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, but in the traffic example, if I believe he doesn't respect me, I get a lot of road rage. I may start calling him some choice words. I notice inside me that there are certain emotions and even physical sensations that come with those, like my body tightens, or it kind of get an adrenaline rush. You know, if I'm riding with somebody, or I might say, "Can you believe that he did that?" So I start gossiping about the guy. So a lot of stuff comes out. And question three is really just about noticing, almost like a fly on the wall, like what happens when I believe that thought? How do I react? What happens when I believe the thought, he doesn't respect me? And so it's just interesting to witness my reaction, my behavior patterns that are conditioned, you could say, that just spring up when I believe that thought. It's like they're triggered by the thought. So question three really invites me to take a look at what happens when I believe the thought. And then question four, again, sitting in this meditatively, just like that photograph, I want to hold still that I'm sitting in the car, he's pulling up in front of me, so there might be a snapshot of him just like cutting me off in the lane. How would I react, or who would I be in that moment if I couldn't believe this thought? Who would I be without my story that he doesn't respect me? And so it's about noticing the before and after in a way. And sometimes I've worked with children on this too. If that's hard for people to grasp, a lot of people say, well, I just can't imagine that. And I find that funny because they imagine this whole world of terror. So I know they're capable of, their imagination works. But another way to look at it is, who was I just before this happened? So that's without the thought. That's a time I was living without the thought. So before it even happened, who was I just driving my car? Or in other words, who would I be without this thought, he doesn't respect me? And I just noticed that I would be more observant to him. I would notice that he drove fast, maybe so I wouldn't hit him. For all I know, he was moving fast because he didn't see me in his blind spot or something. So there's all sorts of things that might come up, but I notice I feel more compassion, more open to being friends with that person versus I want you to die, or get out of my way, or get off this road, or all the angry stuff that comes out in question three. I notice with question four, it's replaced with calmness. I'm not having an adrenaline rush. I can calmly apply the brakes and it doesn't ruin the rest of my drive. So question four is just kind of about noticing, between question three and four, it's really noticing, was it that man that caused the problem inside me, or was it what I was thinking and believing about him that was the cause of my problem? And it's really great to notice that it's my fault, that in the sense that it's self-inflicted wound, because that's something I can change, versus pulling the guy over and having a talk with him and hoping he changes. I mean, chances are I'm never going to see the guy. So I like to know that it is something I can handle. So I love those two questions because they're very empowering in what feels like a disempowering situation.
So the first four questions, just to recap for everyone, is well, first you find the specific situation, the actual snapshot, the moment in time where that stressful thought crystallized in the body, and it's kind of full
Sure.
on. And then from there, from that space, from that moment of stress, ask the first question, is it true? Yes, it's a yes or no. And then if it's a yes, you ask question two, which is, can you absolutely know that it's true? Then you go to question three, and if it was the answer to question one, is it true, is no, you then just skip over question two and go to question three. Question three is, how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? And then question four is, who would you be without the thought? So those are the four questions. Now, how would you describe the next step after the four questions, are the turnarounds to someone brand new? Using that
So
same
we,
example, he doesn't
sure.
respect me.
So you take the original thought, he doesn't respect me, and we do what Katie calls the turnarounds. And really, it's an exploration of, is the opposite of what I was believing true? Could it be just as true or possibly even truer? So the four questions kind of set you up to open your mind a little bit to receive the turnarounds. If you're closed off, you're going to be very resistant to the turnarounds, is what I found. But the turnarounds, there's three different types usually, and you may not have three, you may have more or less, depending on what you're working with. So I do find it helps to have a reference of an object, a subject and an object in the sentence. So, he doesn't respect me versus he's disrespectful. I like if I had he's disrespectful to me is how I would do it, just because it helps with the turnarounds.
Mm-hmm.
So the turnarounds, one of them is the turnaround to the self. And the way I like to explain it is you take every reference to the other person and make it a reference to yourself. So he doesn't respect me becomes I don't respect myself. So in that same situation, I look at, for each of these turnarounds, we want to find some examples, and Katie recommends three specific and genuine examples. In other words, don't fake it, don't make it fluffy. This isn't new agey. Find three concrete things for yourself that you could say, I was disrespectful. So I was disrespectful to myself in that situation because I let my anger get the best of me. My temper went crazy, and I don't like me when I'm that way. So that's one example. So that's the turn of the self. I didn't respect myself in that moment. Another turnaround is the direct opposite. So he doesn't respect me becomes he does respect me, or in that, if you talk in the past tense, he did respect me when he cut me off. And even saying he cut me off is an assumption. That's my experience of it when I'm believing the thought. He does respect me could be he respected me enough to drive quickly. He didn't make me slow down. Or, I could see that he was in a hurry. It wasn't about me. It wasn't personal. The guy's just in a hurry. So he doesn't even know who I am. How could he possibly disrespect me personally? So that turnaround invites me to take a look at the exact opposite. He does respect me, and find some ways that feel, again, they have to feel legitimate to me. I'm not just going to pull stuff out that just to, fulfill the request of finding three examples.
Can I share one that comes up for me about he
Sure.
does respect you? So uh, if what's it called? If you're driving a car and you see a pack of Hell's Angels, are you going to cut them? Are you going to switch quickly into their lane? And the answer is hopefully no. But in that same sense, it's like the guy, quote, cuts you off. He respects you enough to know that you're not going to fly off the handle and try to come after you
Yeah.
because he cut you off. Like, he respects you enough to know that you're not going to engage in some very violent behavior because of what he did.
Yeah, I'm not going to speed up and wreck into him. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one. So yeah, definitely. And so that's a turnaround to the exact opposite. So we take he doesn't respect me and change it to he does. And then the last turnaround is the turnaround to the other, and it's like switching bodies. So you're switching places in the sentence. So any reference to him becomes a reference to myself and vice versa. So he doesn't respect me becomes I don't respect him. And given my road rage in that moment, I certainly had nothing respectful to say. So I'm identifying I didn't respect him because I judged him as this, and this, and I just get very specific with what those judgments are. So those are typically the three. Sometimes you can do the turnaround to the self in a different flavor, or it might even be an additional turnaround to my thinking. So my thinking doesn't respect him, or my thinking doesn't respect me. I can play with that. The turnarounds are kind of a chance to explore the opposites because he did what he did, and it's my story against his, right? So it's really just taking my initial assessment of what I thought happened and comparing it against these other possibilities.
Okay, thank you. So, how is the work different then from other techniques involving the mind? Like, how is the work different from, say, positive thinking?
So positive thinking, I think positive thinking is a good reminder to just consider things, or sometimes positive thinking actually helps me to do the work because it leads me to the negative thinking that eventually will surface. So positive thinking to me is not to be too harsh, but it's like faking it. It's like saying, I'm going to have a wonderful day today, and I could repeat that 1,000 times before I leave my house, and then I get pulled over, or I lose my job, or maybe that guy cut me off in traffic, and there goes my positive affirmation. Positive affirmations just don't stick um, because it's more of a hope-oriented
Hmm.
kind of thing. It's not a concrete thing for the mind. The ego um, will challenge that just as quickly as you thought you believed that positive affirmation.
Yeah, I the discussion I had with Todd, a conclusion I came to is positive thinking is applying a turnaround without doing the work first.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And
Like,
those, just to clarify too, that the turnarounds are not fluffy, just positive thinking
no,
either,
definitely
not
not.
positive affirmations. That's why we want to find those three specific and genuine examples for the turnarounds to make it concrete for us. I mean, it's not enough to say Santa Claus doesn't exist is a turnaround of he does. We have to find three examples of how that's true.
Yeah.
So it's more than just fluffy positive affirmation. Those turnarounds are not also shoulds. I think some people take them that way, and they
Hmm.
try to make shoulds out of them. Well, I'm supposed to be this way, and that's not what they're meant for. It's merely about noticing and observing the situation in a different way and just checking out to see, did I miss something here? Could it be true that the other thing could be just as true as what I thought happened? So it's another opportunity to just reevaluate. It's an
So
investigation.
how? I mean, yeah, and the whole like the turnarounds. That's a whole other subject of um like yeah. I mean, just a lot of turnarounds don't sound very positive. Like I you know I I disrespect me. That's not a positive thinking thing you put on a sticky note and put on your bathroom mirror.
Yeah.
It's like the, the easiest way I understand the turnarounds are there to crack the credibility of the original stressful thought, and that to find genuine ways that the original stressful thought, which caused me so much anger, genuinely with specific examples, is not true. And the turnarounds are not there to find a new victim, find a new perpetrator, shift blame, or
Mm-hmm.
create a new stressful scenario. It's simply to put a chink in the armor of the original stressful thought. Um, and you don't have to live in a space of I disrespect me as some sort of literal, you have to live that. It's just simply observing how when I believe I'm disrespecting him, I'm actually disrespecting me. And through that stillness and observing, it's it just it just crumbles the mortar of the original stressful thought. And yeah, how else would you differentiate the work from psychology, and then how would you differentiate the work specifically from cognitive behavioral therapy?
Well, I'm not a therapist, so I don't know all the ins and outs of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Fine.
But but what I do, a lot of my clients have, or maybe concurrently would go to a therapist at the same time as working with me. And I've heard all kinds of things. I find that the work, if you're open to it, it's kind of like if you don't want to change, you can do the work all day and you're going to avoid answering the questions in one way or another. So you'll rationalize your way out or something. So to me, it's for those people who really want to live a more peaceful life, who are really open to getting real with themselves. The work is a really head-on, it goes to the core, to the thoughts you're believing and tackles it there, versus where I've seen experienced therapy as more of around the long scenic route, you might say. So I think in a fraction of the time you can get there with the work. And again, it's for people who don't want to beat around the bush, you know.
I think I think this was also a discussion with Todd. It may have been with Brian Wagner. I can't remember. It was like, I think it was Todd. You know, part of the real gifts of the work is like to really like we're talking about how Katie has emphasized for the past, like really emphasized in the past 5 years or so. My timeline may be off, but going directly into that snapshot situation, like really going into it. And my understanding as to why, at least from my experience, she doesn't say this specifically, but is that I can try to question all the peripheral stressful thoughts, you know, as opposed to going to the point in time where like it really, you know, that was true, you know. And if I question the actual moment of extreme stress, then, and I really sincerely question it, then the peripheral thoughts all get undone anyway, because if I just question out in the periphery, then my mind anyway, has this tendency is like, yeah, but you know, there was this one moment where it really was true, and I can kind of dance around the edges and not ever, you know. And my experience of psychology personally was a lot of stirring up the whole long, as you say, the scenic route of the entire stressful thing, and not actually identifying, you know, the really super specific moment, but also having, you know, the precise tools that the work has to get to question that precise moment.
Yeah, when I first started doing the work, she didn't have that laser like focus on the situation on those worksheets. Now they say in this
Yeah,
situation.
now it's really honed in on it, and that's been a
Yeah,
noticeable change. Yeah, for the
absolutely. Yeah,
better. Yeah.
because like what you're saying, I think the problem is that the mind, what I experienced with the situation, getting really targeted on a specific moment, that snapshot moment, is that you're pinning down the ego, you're cornering that ego, and you're what we're doing is, you know, when I fill out that judge your neighbor worksheet, I am harvesting my belief system in that very, you know, maybe 3 second moment or whatever, that moment of the pain point. I'm harvesting what I was believing. If I had a video camera, I could have videoed the audio and video of what I did physically in that moment, but we don't have like a thought recorder. And that Judge Your Neighbor worksheet is kind of a thought recorder. We're harvesting what was I attached to. We're looking at our attachments in that moment. So really all the work is about for me is bringing awareness to these patterns of behavior that are so automatic inside me that I just don't even realize I'm doing them or thinking these thoughts. It's a way to slow down and put awareness around it. And in my experience, like even those turnarounds, like I'm disrespectful to myself, you know, again, that's good news because at least I can take care of that, you know, versus trying to change you. But also it helps me to bring into awareness the ways in which I'm not living the way I want to live. And it puts a different awareness around certain habits. Like I've quit an addiction just using that alone. I didn't put any effort into quitting the addiction. I just noticed that the more awareness I put around my beliefs and habits that resulted, it quit me. It made no sense to do it.
Hmm.
The cravings are all gone. It all had to do with just observing rather than judging. Oh, I'm bad or I'm good or I'm right or I'm wrong or trying to control it. It's like I took all of that effort out of it and just simply questioned the thoughts. And it just that space of awareness is really what leads to the transformation. But getting that laser like focus on the situation, I think, is really vital to it. I mean, you can still, again, if you want to take the sort of scenic route, you can get more vague with your worksheets, but the problem is if I say, well, he doesn't respect me, and I'm jumping to like three or four different situations on one worksheet, it gives the ego an opportunity to weasel its way out. It gives it a way to sneak out the back door and be unnoticed. I have documented a lot of these different things. Actually, in an ebook I'm putting out pretty soon
Oh, cool.
about the different ways that the ego, the little traps of the ego, and the mechanics of the mind, and how it uses little things like this to get out of even identifying the thoughts or questioning them. So
Cool.
it's simple, it's sneaky, but the ego at the same time is a friend, not a foe. I think at first we perceive it as a foe, but the more you get to know it, you want it to reveal itself to you, and it reveals so much.
I can imagine this poor, the poor ego. You've got all these, spiritual, quote unquote, spiritual seekers. I must destroy the ego. Can you imagine,
Right.
like,
Oh
if you're
yeah.
gonna personify the ego, like, ego is like, "Ooh, God, I gotta hide as much as I can. This guy's out to kill me.
Yeah.
So with that, what do you find, especially for people new to the work? What are the most common mistakes? You mentioned one already of people taking the turnarounds like as some sort of like militant they have to follow every
Should.
turnaround. What are the most common mistakes you find, especially for people new to the work?
I can only give my own experience too, and so I project that onto others that I work with. But the thing that really happened for me was simply not treating it meditatively. I think that situational focus is what really made it click for me that this is meditative. Um, there's something I've heard Katie say a lot that I also pass on. It's to ask, wait, and receive. So if you fill out that worksheet or you're answering those four questions, it's not about searching for the answer. There's really very little effort. I'd say if you can write with a pen or pencil, that's all the effort you need. If you can listen and write, like take notes, that's really all you're doing. So you see that image of the situation and it triggers all these thoughts. Like if I say the word red, you think of something immediately. You don't have to sit there and consider it. Just something pops into your head. And it's the same way. I see that photograph and it's like the worksheet wants to write itself. Can my hand keep up with it?
Mm.
So it's not an effort, but when I first started out, it was an effort, and I'm like, oh, I don't know who to write about. Now I've got plenty. Um, it's just like an effort to write that worksheet. Now it's just more of a listening exercise. So tuning in to that, it's like having a bad dream. We're just documenting it. So we're documenting the thoughts that created that bad dream. And you can even do the work on things. Or I had a bad dream last night actually, and I did the work on the dream this morning. There were people, like my family was in it, but I know it wasn't really my family. I'm just aware of that in my waking dream. But to see the difference, I can tell that my mother wasn't the cause of my problem. It was my thoughts about her in that dream
Mm-hmm.
sequence. So whether I'm awake or asleep having this dream, I want to document what those thoughts were. So I see that image of that pain point, and just it just flows out. So I think that's one big thing, is people just trying to put too much effort, and really that's almost also another way of the resistance of the ego. It's like a trick to get you to do it right or have control over it. And it takes no more control than hitting record on a video camera and recording. You don't have to put effort into it, in the sense of, the video camera doesn't worry about getting it right.
Mm-hmm.
It just captures what it's noticing. So that's what we're doing with that worksheet too. So I think that's a big one. A lot of people do get stuck in the turnarounds, in terms of they sometimes will take a turnaround and make it like a completely different sentence. So he doesn't respect me might turn into he doesn't care about me or something. Like they'll go completely into left
Yeah.
field. And so that's one thing. I think it's you're really just tweaking one or two words in the sentence when you're doing the turnarounds. Um, those are the main things. I think the other thing is people believing that for questions one and two, you have to end up on a no. They want to get the right answer. I think people, some of my people I work with, I do a local meetup group, and they've told me things like they worry, well, this is the answer you're looking for, right?
Yeah,
It's
I've heard
like
that before.
that's not what I don't care what my answer is my answer, yours is yours. This is about you tapping into your inner wisdom, your truth, not about my truth. So it's about can you get in touch with yourself? And so there are no right or wrong answers with the work. Um, there's a there's a better way of doing it than others I've found, but you can still, get free as long as you really consider those questions. But
Any, go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing that really helps me that Katie often says is the moment you stop answering those questions, those four questions of the work stops working. And it's very literal. It's like an on-off switch. So if I move into a judgment or rationalization or proof and try to prove my yes or my no, for example, then I'm not doing the work. But I think really getting an understanding of what the work is helps in that case because it's like that's the on-off switch. Can you just answer the question, not justify it, not rationalize your way out of it? So just yes or no. It's a yes or no question. And some people get so caught up in explaining why they believe it's a yes or why they believe it's a no. And that tells me they have a little more stillness to get with and really sit with that question longer.
Related to most common mistakes, is there any common roadblocks, like places where you see people getting stuck with the mechanics of it? Or like, is there a particular part of the work where people new to the work you find really can get stuck on, and just they need, yeah, just you see any roadblocks that people run into, whether it's a worksheet, a particular aspect of the four questions, or turnarounds, something.
Yeah, so once you get the meditation part down, I think question three is usually pretty easy for people to answer. It's like, how did I react? That's often very obvious to people, or they can find it. But question four sometimes hangs people up where they're like, well, I just can't imagine that. I can't imagine the opposite. So sometimes that tells me they didn't really sit meditatively long enough with maybe questions one, two, or three. So just to really get still with it. Again, you're being shown it's that ask, wait, and receive thing for questions one, two, three, and four, and even the turnarounds. So I think question four, sometimes people think they can't imagine that world without this belief. And sometimes I'll also hear people say things like, oh, I'd have more peace and be calm. You got to get more specific than that. And for me, that's not enough. I need to know who would I be in that moment without my story, without this thought. So I like to really take a look and just consider, sitting in that traffic where this man's cutting me off, who would I be without my story of what that he doesn't respect me? It's like to really sit with that. And the turnarounds too, I think some people get stuck with trying to find like they feel like it's more of like a school assignment where they have to find X number of turnarounds or they did it wrong or it's more of an exploration. I think there's more freedom in the process than people give credit to as
Mm.
well. Like it's an investigation of yourself. You're free to explore and test. It's about testing. Um, I don't know if it's truly Katie's experience, but the way I relate to Katie's story of her awakening and such is that she had to test what was true for her. She had to find some grounding because she just came from this reference of nothing is true. Nothing I believe is true. And then these beliefs that people say and that she's thought came back to her.
Hmm.
So these four questions and turnarounds are there as kind of a litmus test almost to like go through and just say, well, is that really true? To really go in with the curiosity of a child, I think is the maturity of an adult, but the curiosity of a child, maybe, if that makes sense. But to really go into the four questions and turnarounds with that sense of freedom and playfulness, not this rigid, I have to get it right kind of attitude. I think that's gonna hang you up. You're not gonna find examples for the turnarounds or not answer those core questions honestly.
Yeah, two things I want to comment on. One is you talk like people getting caught up on the turnarounds as a school assignment, or my I've come into a lot of people who struggle with the sheer. I mean, the turnarounds do require some training in terms of the mechanics of like
Hmm.
this is how to do a turnaround. This is how to turn around to the other, to the opposite, to the self, and when I first started the work, I was very frustrated with people who seem to be so fluid and effortless with getting the turnarounds, and I left the work mentally because I was fixated on trying to figure out the mechanics of the turnaround, and
Hmm.
that's why I made the turnaround trainer, was simply
Hmm.
to okay, yeah, I feel like this is a school assignment. Okay, the answer, the way out is the way through. So literally, I made a school assignment like trainer of here's,
Hmm.
30, 60 assignments to tick through, and they just get faster and easier and easier. So now that the mechanics are so much easier because they're intentionally practiced,
Hmm.
then I can do the turnarounds so much more fluidly without leaving the process of the work. So I totally agree. Like the turnarounds seem to be in terms of mechanics where people get step out of the work because of that they're not getting it. It's more than simply asking a question. It's now they got to take the sentence and rework. It's like grammar or something.
And that can pull you right out of the work too if you get caught up in the process mid this meditation. You're like, "What? How do I do it?" So the how
Yeah,
to, and so it is good to kind of get that down. So there definitely is that learning curve of how
sure.
to do it. But I think what a lot of people I experience having resistance with is more, a closed mind when the ego is really focused and believes it's right, just can't open up to those turnarounds. It can't see, well, what do you mean I disrespected him? He clearly disrespected me in this case. It's like there's a lot of resistance to it. So that's why I say go into it with curiosity.
Mm,
Don't censor what's coming up. Just be curious about, well, let's check it out. It doesn't mean it's in stone yet. Just check it out and see, could it be any way possible that I disrespected myself or that person? So we're just looking at the possibilities with those turnarounds. It's not like a rigid, oh, great, look what I did. Now I'm the bad guy. Like you said, it's not about blaming.
mm,
But I think that the fearful ego gets caught up in that. And like a little child, it like runs to mommy or something and doesn't. It's just like, I am not going to look at those, that there's no way that could be true, to the point where it's blind to
yeah.
even the possibility of that turnaround. And so that's where I've noticed some resistance with, even if you know how to do it, you still may have that other layer of that resistance of there's no way that could be true. Like your mind wouldn't even consider it.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you, and I think that's the turnarounds by itself is a whole topic for a whole separate interview,
Sure.
and
Absolutely.
it's just such a valuable, and I think to me it's a piece that a lot of people struggle with, whether it's the mechanics or the ego or something else. It
Hmm.
seems to be a very clear hotspot for people, and I think that deserves a whole separate chunk of time just to go into
Certainly.
that. The other thing you mentioned was like something interesting. You said like Katie's experience, how she just, for those people who don't know Katie's story, and she talks about this openly, writes about it, talks about it. She
Mm.
got so depressed she ended up in a halfway house and then was sleeping in the attic, separate from everyone else because everyone else was afraid
Hmm.
of her anger and whatnot. And then she was sleeping on the floor because she had such low self-esteem. She didn't think she deserved the bed. And she woke up one morning to see a cockroach crawl over her foot. And in that moment, just like the lightning bolt of pure awareness hit her, that when she believed her thoughts, she suffered. When she didn't believe her thoughts, she didn't suffer. And then like all of a sudden, her reference point vanished of who she was, and then had to use
Hmm.
the work to get grounding back. And then that her story, especially next to Eckhart Tolle's story, where he just like, one second, there's a train. So going back to Eckhart Tolle's story, where he just like sat on this park bench and magically got the lightning bolt of pure awareness, and like stayed on the park bench for whatever it was, a year or 2 years, and just kind of marinated in his own bliss of awareness. And Katie had her own like really amazing and sometimes very hilarious journey of wandering into other people's houses because she had no concept that this wasn't her house, that everything was all connected. And I found myself in a space of like becoming a little jealous. Like, where's my magic cockroach? Where's my magic, park bench? Why can't I be, donged on the head with awareness? And what I realized was that for people who get that lightning bolt of awareness, probably a lot of them we either A, never hear about, or B, they don't survive. Because they are either like, they can either, die from circumstance or people being totally clueless or afraid of these people walking around, like Katie walking. She was living in another part. If she wasn't living like in California, she was living in somewhere very much less friendly. She wouldn't have got a puzzled look when she walked into someone's house. She might have gotten shot. And so it's like the path that I see of like we're starting from the other end, even though it seems, quote, longer, it seems on some level gentle and some level safer, and that it's not like the dong on the forehead is not as glamorous or wonderful as we may think it is, or at least I don't think it is.
And in my understanding of Katie's experience, she's did the work. She identified those 4 questions in her experience as soon as the thoughts came back, and that worksheet, the judge and neighbor, came out of her experience of she would try to go to the desert to get away from her thoughts and took the whole world with her, and all these thoughts followed her. You can't move away from them, and so she found a way to kind of capture them on paper, to stop the mind on paper, she says, to identify what was going on, to really see what was left, what was keeping her from that glimpse of pure awareness, like you described it. And Eckhart Tolle, too, the story I heard of him, I think, in The Power of Now, is that he was suicidal, and he said, I'm going to kill myself. And then he had the awareness of, well, are there 2 of me? Who is this I that wants to kill myself? Are there 2 of me here? And that was what somehow sparked it for him. So on one hand, yeah, if a dong on the head requires severe depression, I'm glad I'm not quite there. But this works. It's good to know that the work can touch those, anything that's a trauma, abuse situation. It can go that deep if you want to go there. Or you could just use it on something as everyday as someone didn't respect me. So there's all kinds of levels. I love that it will journey with you. As deep as you want to take it down the rabbit hole, but yeah, I lived in Florida with lots of cockroaches, and none of them walked over my body, unfortunately. So I tried,
Right. Otherwise, all the entomologists in the world would be, the complete state of bliss and awareness or whatever.
That's right, laying on the floor.
Right. So another question for you. Who is the work not for?
Well, first of all, children can do it. Any age level is able to do it, as long as you can answer a question, really. As long as you can sit still long enough to answer a question. I think that the work is not for people who want to be right, who want to really hold their position in a given, whether it's a family situation where I know that they're wrong and I'm right, or if you really want to be right or be in control in what some may consider a very egotistical way, I don't think you're going to be open enough to do the work. So at least in that moment that the work is not for them, I think you have to bring a certain level of curiosity or a willingness to question the mind. You have to be open to even that process, that concept of questioning your belief system. And the work, I've met some people who wanted to do the work with me who said, but I'm afraid I'm just going to be walked all over if I question all these beliefs. Like, I think in A Thousand Names for Joy, Katie talks about it's not like you just go sit in the mountaintop and drool, when you question all your thoughts. You still do stuff, you take action. It's just more clear action. So the work is empowering, not disempowering. And if you read her books, there's a lot of examples of that. But it's one of those things that people, it's again a fear of the ego to talk you out of doing it. So I think people who don't really have an openness to do it, or who are really attached to their story and don't want to let it go, it's like, all of these stories we have revolve around three main things, like safety, comfort, and pleasure. And if you look at like even the Maslow pyramid hierarchy of needs, the very bottom are our safety needs and our comfort and such. But it's all about safety, comfort, and pleasure. So you're talking about when you're questioning a belief system, you're talking about taking away a piece of that person's identity. So it can be very painful or scary to people who aren't really that familiar with the work. I mean, I can say in the last 6 years, I've questioned some very interesting things, some things that people might even consider positive thoughts I've questioned.
Oh yeah.
And they're fascinating. And I've never had a negative experience come out of it. It's always been more eye-opening, and it's almost like just in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy going from black and white to color, just opening that door and seeing this whole world you didn't know was there. Like reality just sits here waiting to be recognized, and our beliefs, if we're really attached, you just won't budge. So I think it's not that it's for any specific group, but if you're really in a pain point, like if you're really going through a painful moment, I think too, if you're like in the midst of your tears, it might be a little hard to focus on the four questions. But the good thing about the work is the people don't even have to be alive that you're judging. You're collecting your belief system about a moment that's a memory for you, that's showing up now in your life as what you'd call memory, and you see that image, and we're questioning the thoughts that image triggers. So those people that we're doing the work on don't have to be alive. They could be dead. They could have left our lives and we have no communication with them. So that's what I love about the work. So there's really no restrictions in that regard. But in the moment I'm in pain and bawling my eyes out, it's really hard for me to answer those questions. So the work is we're always working with the past when we're doing those worksheets. And if we think we're working with the future, we're still working with the past. We've just spiced up a little and made into a future. So we're always dealing with something we've experienced or believed before.
So where did you get, because I've never heard Katie say you're either questioning safety, comfort, or pleasure. Is that something from her, or is that something from your observations or somewhere else?
It's kind of a mix, actually. I've heard Katie say that every belief is about the body and the belief that I am this body. And so every belief is about your safety, comfort, or pleasure of that body. So like if you want to go to the core belief, like the initial belief is that the I belief that you, and then I am this body, and then I am a man, I am whatever my occupation is, I am this age. But the I is like the first lie, it's the first attachment, and everything else comes out of it. But what we identify as mind identifies as body. And so we're always, every belief, like you disrespected me, is about protecting this body because I believe that's what I am when I'm attached. When my mind believes that's who I am, then it wants to protect that or make sure it's comfortable or safe or pleasurable. Sometimes it's a combination of all three. But so I got it from Katie, hearing her at her school and such, or any of her live events, talking about that identification with the body, and that it's all really about safety, comfort, and pleasure. And I invite anybody to test that out and just to notice too the beliefs you're holding. How do they relate back to that? When we're disidentified, when you're really like in a state of cognitive flow, where you're really like focused or in the zone, doing something you're passionate about and you love, and you lose all sense of time, and you're very present, you might say, you don't worry about your safety, comfort, or pleasure. You're not identified with the body. You're just kind of immersed in the enthusiasm of the moment. And so that's another way to test it, is just to notice those times where you don't have the attachment to I am this body. And the more you do the work, again, it can be scary for some if you're worried about losing your identity. Some of us love to hold on to our victim identity or to be in control or to be right. Those are some really deep ones. Or to have people like us. If you're really attached to those identities, it will be difficult for you to do the work in given situations where you're really holding on to those things. So you have to generally have the openness to take a look. But the more you question those things, I'd say that I disidentify from the body that you're looking at. I don't necessarily identify with that in any moment necessarily. And there are times when I do, and those are the beliefs I've left to work on. When I really, like, you hurt me in some way or you threatened me. It's all about losing something, but it all goes back to the body.
Interesting. So, tell us, Todd. Sorry, Brian. Um, where can
I'll take
people?
either.
They'll take you right.
I'm not a tech.
So, yeah, we just talked about that whole eye identification thing, so we'll throw in the
I'll
name
take
as
Todd
well.
for a minute. It felt okay.
The first lie is I. The second lie is your name. Okay, right. So, whoever you are, tell our audience here what type of classes, programs, or coaching do you do, and where can they go to learn more about that?
Sure, thank you. Well, like you mentioned earlier, my website is friendly dash, and it is an actual dash or a hyphen universe.com, and that's where you're going to find. I'll soon be doing some more blogging, and if you have questions and answers, I'm going to be doing a video question and answer blog. So any questions that people also have in addition to this course, as they're really digging into the course, if there's other questions they have, not unlike the ones you're asking, those will be things that will be part of a video. The
The
courses
course,
I'm on.
the course itself. I mean, this particular interview is going to be, I think, freely available for people. I'm
Oh,
putting on the
sure.
YouTube. It's also going to be in the course, in the Work Online course itself.
Work online.
But
Yeah,
this video is more just this is more available to the public. So we're
sure.
just
So yeah, the work online course, as people dig into that course, they might come up with additional questions, or just as they're experimenting with the work too. So I'm going to have a video blog on there, and also the courses I've offered typically deal with communication, and I am tailoring it more towards the direction these days of working with solopreneurs or entrepreneurs who want to make the world a better place through their gifts and talents. So whether you're doing yoga, Pilates, Reiki, or working with the mind as a life coach or something, any of those kind of things, what I do is help people with their mindset. So one of the courses I do offer currently is called the Client Experience Blueprint. So I'm actually trained in customer experience design and usability and that kind of stuff. So I merged the mindset work with that in that course. And the very first module of that course is dealing with our mindset and our procrastination habits and getting in touch with personal transformations that we've gone through so that we can then share that with other people through our products and services. So the clientexperienceblueprint.com is another website you could check out. But Friendly Universe is where everything's kind of the hub of what I do. And I do still work sometimes with individuals and couples, but most of that has to do with relationships, communication, everything from listening exercises, like how do I hear what you're saying, or am I overlaying that with stories? So there's the actual words coming out of your mouth and then what I put on top of it. And also speaking your truth or expressing yourself more honestly. So that's what we do a lot in those communication courses. It's currently, the name may change. It's currently called Radical Awareness.
now these are
There's
all
a new
online. Do people don't like
These are all
travel?
online
Okay, okay.
courses. Yeah, I do them. There's a video portion to it where you learn a lesson, and then we get together on the phone, and there's some practicing of this as
Great.
well.
All right.
So there's kind of a hybrid course.
Cool. Excellent. All right. Any last closing thoughts or anything to our viewers, most of which you can assume are brand new to the work?
Yeah, just don't worry about your first 10 worksheets or so. Don't worry about getting it right.
Mhm.
Have fun, be playful with this. Maybe if you're not really grasping the process, don't pick your most traumatic event to work on first. But on the other hand, pick something that's very memorable, that's very easy for you to create a picture in your mind about something that maybe bothers you frequently or annoys you or frustrates. But get really in touch and go through. It's okay to go through the mechanics part of it, like what are the 4 questions, and here's how to do the turnarounds. So I think just play with it. Don't give up if the first worksheet doesn't work. I've worked with people who have claimed to have done the work, like 50 worksheets on my son, and I still am mad at him. And what I found is those people haven't actually done the work. They weren't answering the 4 questions of the work. They weren't answering the questions that are on that Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. To me, the more I do the work, the clearer those questions actually get. They're so obvious, but the ego would even twist those questions. The ego would add on to the simple questions on those worksheets. So I think that the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, the One Belief at a Time worksheet are great tools to really practice the work on your own and just, be open as you can to go through that process, and don't worry about getting it right. Just, like anything else, you have to practice. It's a skill to be developed on one hand, but the cool thing is that the work kind of takes over. It kind of goes on autopilot after you've done a little bit of it, and it'll start questioning for you. Your mind has that new layer of filtering that it adds onto the world.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Todd. This was great, and I look
I'll
forward to
take
doing.
Todd again, or Bryan.
Sorry,
I'll take Todd or Bryan.
You. Thank you. You. It's feels like a Bill Cosby sketch where he talked about, I love it when, my mother got so mad she couldn't remember my name.
Yeah, my mom.
Come here, what is your name?
It's nice to sometimes in those situations maybe not identify with the other name, but
Right.
if you're in trouble.
So thank you again very much. Look, let's do some more interviews. We'll go in depth into some more specific aspects of the work. Like we mentioned, the turnarounds. We'll do some others as well. And thank you again. So this is Bryan Clark of friendly-universe.com. And thank you very much, and look forward to interviewing on some more topics on the work.
Thank you, Sam. It's been a pleasure.
Same here. All right, take care.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.